keep the message simple. More, if not better. The most effective messaging is clear, concise, persuasive, and easy to understand. Hello again. Welcome to The Ruthless Truth. I am your host, Truth Davis. In this forum, I share opinions, thoughts, truths on a wide variety of topics based on what I believe to be a unique life experience. I'm an inner city kid that ascended to the C-suite of a Fortune 100 company. So I've seen a few things. And you can read more of the details in the notes of the bio. My intent is to share stories and hopefully provide some life and career lessons that will assist you in your life and career journey. Please follow me on Instagram at TruthDavis5. Subscribe to the YouTube channel Ruthless Truth. And there's also a Facebook page, Ruthless Truth. General format, I'll share some initial thoughts on current news topics. Then I'll pick one subject and go on a deeper dive, and that'll be today's truth. And then I like to end with an American history fun fact. Now, I really wanted to open this episode by sharing some positive economic news. But quite frankly, it's hard to find. We did see some cooling of inflation in July, mostly driven by declining oil prices. But now that hostilities in the Iran war have escalated again, we are now seeing a surge in gas prices in August. And mortgage rates remain stubbornly high. So affordability is still the number one issue and concern of the American people. And that's why it was somewhat perplexing, although I guess not that surprising, to hear the president recently say that, quote, gas prices are not that high and we should be comfortable spending, quote, a tiny little bit more to help keep Iran from having a nuclear weapon. Not exactly comforting or reassuring, but that's the president. Okay, when was the last time you went to Burger King? Well, I can tell you for me, it's been years. But as I prepared to discuss Burger King today, it just didn't seem right that I had no firsthand experience. So today, I got in my car, I went to Burger King to get a Whopper. No DoorDash, okay? And it was good. Okay, now I can talk about their business. Last week, Burger King reported an 8% increase in sales versus the same quarter last year. For reference, McDonald's reported less than a 1% increase. And as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, Wendy's is flailing, reporting a 7% decline and currently closing hundreds of stores. So after years of disappointing results, how did Burger King turn it around? Well, they did it by focusing on the key factors that all businesses need in order to be successful. Leadership, strategy, investment, and marketing. I am often amazed at the number of businesses that suffer because they go away from these proven fundamentals. In the case of Burger King, it started with a new leader, Tom Curtis, who had spent decades as a Domino's multi-unit franchisee and also an executive. And after accepting the position of Burger King president, not only did he spend time with franchisees, but he also spoke directly to customers. Earlier this year, he posted a video on TikTok and invited customers to call him and give him feedback, comments, complaints. He has personally taken over 3,300 calls this year. And Curtis didn't ask the franchisees to spend money, but instead, Burger King's parent company spent hundreds of millions of dollars on operations, improving restaurant equipment, accelerating remodel programs, and working with franchisees to improve the actual guest experience. And then there's the Whopper. Burger King hired Amy Alarcon as head chef. Now, she formerly held the same position at Popeyes, where she designed the chicken sandwich that took the nation by storm. And for the Whopper, She added a more premium bun, new mayo, and a box to preserve freshness. Finally, this was all supported with a new marketing campaign where they fired the previous creepy BK mascot, and then they boldly state, "There's a new king, and it's you." I just have to say congratulations to Burger King. I love to see market confirmation that the fundamentals of business still matter. And finally, on a very sad note, I am shocked and saddened by the recent passing of Hayden Pantierre. Although only 36 years old, she already had enjoyed a full career with not one, but 2 hit TV shows, in addition to major motion picture credits to her name. I remember watching Heroes with my son, and I believe you could walk up to just about any millennial male today and say, "Save the cheerleader?" And they would reply with, "Save the world." And Nashville, especially the first season, oh my God, great show with great cast, great songs, but there's no denying that Hayden's character of Juliet Barnes was the driving force. And this tragedy also reminds us, you never know what demons someone is battling. Now, in her case, she had been very public with her struggles with mental health, addiction, and postpartum issues. I mean, just a couple of months ago, she was on a PR tour promoting her recently released memoir, This Is Me. We all thought she was on the mend. But again, I guess you never know. So, rest in peace, Hayden Pantierre. We will all miss you. Okay, let's get to today's truth. Today's truth. You know, I had a nearly 30-year career in corporate marketing, so not surprisingly, I am a huge advocate and believer in the power of messaging. I mean, I built my career and fortune on the business results generated by effective messaging. And while most people recognize that certain advertising or political messaging can be impactful, I think few people truly appreciate the broad potential impact of persuasive communication. So in today's truth, I want to talk to you about the importance and impact of messaging and also provide some guidance on how you can improve your messaging. Okay, first some basics. While communication always involves a deliverer and a receiver of a message, these parties do not have equal responsibility. As I always say, the responsibility of communication is on the communicator. Why? Because the communicator is the one attempting to gain benefit from the communication. Whether it's a sales pitch, a business presentation, asking for a date, requesting a transfer, or just a college application. The communicator is trying to get something from the other party. So given the potential impact, why are so many people bad at messaging? Well, as I was thinking about how best to explain this, I decided a real life example would provide the best illustration. And given our current times, I can think of no better example of the good and bad of communication, strategy, and execution than American politics. And what's so crazy is there are very few industries or situations where messaging is more important than politics. The entire goal is to persuade people to support you and vote for you. But given election results over the past few years, you could reasonably argue that the Democrats have not been effective communicators since Barack Obama was in office. I mean, despite high satisfaction among voters, as well as Trump's approval rating reaching the lowest point ever, the Democrats have yet to construct a compelling and persuasive message to voters. Now, I want to be extremely clear here. This is not a political discussion. Your personal politics is irrelevant to the point of my lesson here. I'm not saying I agree with anything either party is trying to say. I'm just providing an objective assessment of results. Okay, let's get into it. The first and most important factor of effective messaging is know your audience. And believe me, there is no such thing as knowing your audience too well. The better and more in-depth your understanding of your audience is, the better your message will resonate. And it doesn't matter if it's an audience of one, such as a job interview, or an audience of millions, such as a national advertising campaign. You need to know your audience. When I was in corporate America, I took meeting preparation seriously, especially if I was meeting with someone for the first time. If it was a potential partner, vendor, or customer, I did extensive research on the company and then reviewed the profile and professional history of every participant in the meeting. I tried to learn everything I could, as it would provide potential insight and leverage in the discussion. And there are two elements of knowing your audience. I mean, the first one's somewhat obvious. You need to know who they are and understand their situation. But the second element is you need to know the size of the audience. For example, many people were shocked when Donald Trump was first elected in 2016. And the sad thing is, 10 years later, many of these people still don't know what happened. Well, one of the keys to knowing your audience is looking at them through an objective lens and not bringing your personal biases, assumptions, values, or priorities. You have to see things the way the audience does, not how you yourself see them. In 2016, Donald Trump correctly identified a group of the voting public that felt ignored and neglected. You know, those are strong emotions. And whether true or not, these people were convinced that the system cared about other groups, but not themselves. And while Trump has built a wide and diverse group of supporters, including Latino and Black men, the core base was comprised of less educated, lower income, Christian white people. Now, did Trump in any way share life experiences with these people? Of course not. But he recognized and he understood them, and he spoke to them in a way that they believed he understood them and cared about them. Which gets to point 2 about effective messaging. Keep it simple. Far and away, the biggest mistake I see people make is believing that more is better. You know, if I'm making my argument and 3 points are good, then 6 points must be better. No. People can only retain so much. If given too much to process, they may just check out completely. This is not just for verbal communication, but equally important for written or print messaging or advertising. We've all seen billboards that had so much information on them that you couldn't read them as you were driving by at 60 miles per hour. I still remember the best billboard I've ever seen. It was over 20 years ago in San Francisco, but I remember it like I saw it this morning. The visual was this big, scary, alien-looking monster, and the text on the billboard simply read, "When they come, they will eat the fat ones first." 24-hour fitness. Brilliant. Hey, try to make this a practice or habit. Whenever you're preparing to deliver a message, whether it be one-on-one, a presentation, a speech, or an email, once you have an initial draft, review it and find ways to make it shorter or briefer. I review every email before I send it. First, I want to ensure there are no typos or misstatements. Errors reflect poorly on you, especially if it's a professional email. Second, I look to eliminate any words or points that don't really improve the message. In business, clear writing is an indication of clear thinking. And continuing with the Trump messaging from 2016, he kept it simple. Build a wall, lock her up. He didn't spend time outlining policies and proposed legislation because he knew they didn't care. He just needed them to trust him, and he would take care of the details later. Which leads to point 3. Once you know your audience and you've developed an effective message, The key is stay on message. Now, I know this sounds simple, but believe me, this requires a level of focus and discipline that many people struggle to maintain. Now, on the campaign trail, this can be a double-edged sword. Because while a candidate definitely wants to ensure they consistently deliver their most compelling and persuasive points, he also wants to balance this with being personable and not sounding robotic. And this is why some political candidates avoid town halls and debates. It's easier to stay on message when the communication is one way without interruption. Which leads me to my final and arguably most impactful point. Try to anticipate questions and be prepared in advance to respond. I often tell people, anyone can sound good and knowledgeable when reading a prepared presentation, but credibility and confidence is gained in the Q&A. Not only do you reinforce your subject matter expertise, but you dissuade others from questioning you. Whenever I prepare for a presentation or meeting, I first make my best effort in developing a compelling message. Then I try to think of every possible way to tear it apart. And trust me, this exercise and preparation will greatly limit the risk of your message being ineffective. So to summarize, being an effective communicator will assist you in just about any endeavor you pursue, whether it be personal or professional. The key to strong communication is effective messaging, and here's what you can do to improve your messaging. First, know your audience, both in terms of profile, needs, and audience size. Second, keep the message simple. More is not better. The most effective messaging is clear, concise, persuasive, and easy to understand. Third, stay on message. And repetition helps a lot here, especially if you may encounter others or opposition that want to throw you off message. And finally, anticipate questions and be prepared to respond. Q&A is an opportunity to reinforce subject matter expertise, solidify confidence, and build trust and support. Okay, let's get to today's American History Fun Fact. Today's American History Fun Fact. I know a lot of people think that the current president is a corrupt grifter who has used the presidency to enrich himself to $2 billion in less than 2 years. And while I agree his behavior is inexcusable and at times despicable, to date, he hasn't done anything illegal. Yeah, he's pushed and challenged the system up to the line, but he hadn't crossed it. So while you may not like it, you can't really call it corrupt. Well, in today's American History Fun Fact, I will outline the most corrupt presidency in U.S. history, and it's not even close. I'm sure many of you will find it appalling. And what's so fascinating is that no one knew about it while it was happening. Okay? While he was president, he was very popular. We didn't learn about all the shit until after he left office. Okay. I'm talking about Warren G. Harding, who was born November 2nd, 1865. A lifelong Ohioan, he held many political offices in the state, including U.S. Senator from 1915 until elected president in 1920. The popular Republican was inaugurated as the 29th president on March 4th, 1921. Now, when Harding took office, the nation was in the midst of a post-war economic decline. And at the suggestion of legislative leaders, Harding called a special session of Congress to convene April 11th. And when Harding addressed the joint session the following day, he proposed a number of domestic policies and programs that would allow the nation to, quote, return to normalcy, end quote, following World War I. And his list of accomplishments is impressive. He signed the Budget and County Act of 1921 to create the first unified federal budget and general accounting office. He worked with Treasury Secretary Andrew Mellon to slash wartime excess profit taxes and lower the top income tax rates. He signed the Fordney-McCumber Tariff Act to protect domestic industries, and he established the Veterans Bureau to centralize and improve medical care for returning World War I soldiers. And finally, he signed the Federal Highway Act of 1921 to expand and fund the national road system. Now, in late July 1923, Harding started experiencing health issues. First, he suffered from gastrointestinal problems, which were later complicated by heart problems and pneumonia. But by the afternoon of August 2nd, 1923, Harding's condition appeared to be improving, and his doctors even allowed him to sit up in bed. Now, at around 7:30 that evening, his wife Florence was reading to him a flattering article about him from the Saturday Evening Post. And she paused, and he told her, that's good. Go on, read some more. Well, those were to be his last words. President Warren G. Harding died on August 2nd, 1923, at the age of 57. Harding's unexpected death came as a great shock to the nation. He was liked and admired. Both the press and public had followed his illness closely and had been reassured by his apparent recovery. Harding's body was carried to his train in a casket for a journey across the nation, which followed closely and was followed closely in the newspapers. 9 million people lined the railroad tracks as the train carrying his body proceeded from San Francisco to Washington, D.C. Now, in the months preceding his death, there started some allegations of corruption. They began to swirl around several members of his, quote, Ohio gang, which were the longtime political allies and poker buddies whom Harding had appointed to his cabinet and other powerful positions. Let's start with Charles Forbes, head of the newly established Veterans Bureau. He was accused of accepting kickbacks from contractors building veterans hospitals and illegally selling surplus medical supplies. A Senate investigation in 1924 found that Forbes and his associates stole more than $200 million, which is nearly $2.8 billion in today's money, from the Bureau. Forbes was sentenced to 2 years in prison for fraud, conspiracy, and bribery. Additionally, Harry Daugherty, a political operative who was appointed Attorney General after engineering Harding's presidential nomination. He stood trial twice for conspiracy of selling illegal permits and pardons, but he was never convicted. Daugherty's private secretary, Jess Smith, committed suicide in May 1923, a day after Harding informed him of his pending arrest for corruption in a White House meeting. But the most enduring stain on the Harding presidency was left by Secretary of Interior Albert Fall and the Teapot Dome scandal. In 1921, Secretary of Interior Albert Fall convinced Harding to shift oversight of strategic oil reserves set aside for the U.S. Navy to the Department of the Interior. Fall then secretly granted lucrative no-bid contracts for exclusive drilling rights to the Federal Reserves, which contained high-grade petroleum worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And he sold them to a pair of longtime friends and oil tycoons. Now, after gaining the exclusive drilling rights to the reserve in Teapot Dome, Wyoming, Mammoth Oil Company owner Henry Sinclair gave Fall $300,000 in Liberty bonds and cash and delivered a large herd of livestock to his ranch. Now, hearings into Teapot Dome began in October 1923, which was 2 months after Harding's death. Fall was convicted in 1929 of accepting bribes, and in 1931 became the first U.S. cabinet member to be imprisoned for crimes committed in office. As more investigations were launched, additional scandals were uncovered. But here's the thing. By all accounts, Harding himself never actively committed fraud or did anything wrong. I mean, his only real crime was hiring his friends who proved to be unscrupulous, greedy, and ruthless. But while Harding was a relatively good guy in his political career, same can't be said about his personal life. Harding began an extramarital romance with Carrie Phillips in 1905 when he was Ohio's lieutenant governor. Now, Phillips was the wife of one of Harding's close friends, and the affair continued until 1920, the year he received the nomination for president. Now, supporters saw Phillips as a threat and risk, so the Republican National Committee agreed to give her a $2,000 monthly stipend and then $25,000 to pay for a cruise to Japan and China during the fall of 1920. And by the time Phillips returned to America, Harding had been elected to the White House. Then, in 1927, another Harding mistress, Nan Britton, published a book revealing that she first met Harding in 1914 at a U.S. Senate campaign when she was just a teenager. And by the time she was 20, Britton had entered into an intimate relationship with the then 51-year-old senator. Britton wrote that Harding paid for her to live in a New Jersey house where in October 1919, she secretly gave birth to their daughter, Elizabeth Ann, whom she suspected was conceived on a couch in Harding's Senate office. Now, Harding never met Elizabeth, but provided monthly child support payments that were hand-delivered by Secret Service agents. Again, the public did not learn about all the Harding scandals until after his death in 1923. And had these scandals never surfaced, historians would list his presidency as one of the most effective and productive administrations. But unfortunately, his legacy is that of the most corrupt president ever. Okay, that's all I have for you today on The Ruthless Truth. Thank you so much for listening. Again, follow me on Instagram at TruthDavis5. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, Ruthless Truth. And there's also a Facebook page, Ruthless Truth. And I encourage you to review past episodes. They cover a wide range of topics. I'm sure you will find something of assistance. And again, thanks for listening, and I will talk to all of you soon.